Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable CNN network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons. Join us Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time at freedomslips.com. At Revolution Radio. Our world team members are Dennis Fetcho, John Ilias, David Dunger, Hyla Cass, MD, Melanie Richton, Jim Mars, Paula Harris, John Trallo, Maria Payan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous.
It is. Very dangerous.
Count me in.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps.
Enjoy your
Extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another?
Extra big-ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please
What?
come back when you can afford to make
no,
a purchase.
no.
I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My kids
sorry
are
you're
starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Revising Reality. I'm your host, Tim Kaiser, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Crystal Turner. How are you today, Crystal? Hey.
I'm good. And yourself?
Oh, just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So, we have an interesting show for you tonight. We're going to be talking about Snowden, Wikileaks, Anonymous, and the Panama Papers, which are much more recent. Because there's a lot of a trail of breadcrumbs to be followed here to try to figure out whether or not these things have any meaning whatsoever besides being PSYOPS and distraction.
Limited hangouts, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a term that I actually really didn't know much about until when I started researching for this show, and I found that rather interesting. Because they have done that in the past, lots of different times. And another one, to try to put this in perspective, I think we need to go into the past to look at how this goes. To look at, like, if in the past, have they done the same things? Or have they always been doing this? Or is it possible that, this is a brand new thing? And I don't know if many people listening to the show have ever heard of what I gotta find the link. I have it up here somewhere. I have so many links up, it's ridiculous.
Mhm.
Tabs everywhere.
Well, I
But I
have a
don't
few
know.
things I can share with you on how to identify a CIA limited hangout operation.
Okay. Do you wanna give me 1 second here because
Yeah,
there's
sure.
what was
Take your
that
time.
thing you said project? What was that thing you sent me? I have it here somewhere. Give me a second.
I think I've sent you so much stuff I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Um,
know.
project. It starts with an S. It was an older project that was run where the army through the army intelligence services and uh, and at that time what isn't the OSS? Oh yeah, Project Shamrock. There it is.
Yes, exactly. I sent that the other day. Shamrocks and shenanigans, sure did, and that was some information that I had ran across, you know, through all of my internet research, you know. So I run across stuff and I read so much, you know, that I sometimes forget what I've read. So, you know, I have to kind of piece it all together, you know, kind of regroup. And but the Project Shamrock, that is a great bit of information, and I haven't really seen many people post about that. But yeah, we can get right into that if you want. You
I
know,
do. Can you turn up your mic a little bit?
unfortunately, I'm not able to. I'm
All
really
right.
sorry about that.
1 second. Let's see. I don't know if I can turn it up. Do say something again, Crystal.
I'm ready to start reading from Schneider on security in regarding of Project Shamrock.
Let's see here. Did that Trinity's out there saying that you need to turn up your mic? Did that
There's
help at all, Trinity?
not able to turn it up.
I know.
That's
Hang
the
on. I
issue.
was trying to figure
Yeah,
out how to do it on my end, but I might have.
and that's really unfortunate to be
Actually,
on here.
that's okay. It happens.
Yeah. Maybe I can speak louder. How about that?
Sure. Make it go all out. Um, yeah. Go ahead and talk about Project Shamrock for a little bit, and I'll see if I can make your mic a little bit louder for the listeners on
All
my
right.
end.
Well, I'm just going to read from some of the things that I found since I'm
Yeah.
not
Go
able
ahead.
to articulate it myself right now. I think, you know, the further I go with researching, I'll be able to make it my own. So I'm just going to read from what I've got. Schneider on security. And he goes to saying decades before 9/11 and the subsequent Bush order that directed the NSA to eavesdrop on every phone call, email message, and who knows what else going into or out of the United States, U.S. citizens included, they did the same thing with telegrams. It was called Project Shamrock. And anyone who thinks that this is a new legal and technological terrain should read up on that program. So they've been doing this decades before what's coming out with Snowden. Snowden saying that we've been, you know, we're being spied on. Okay, we've been spied on since probably the first beginnings of communication. Okay? Project Shamrock was an espionage exercise that involved the accumulation of all telegraphic data entering into or exiting from the United States. The Armed Forces Security Agency, AFSA, and its successor, NSA, were given direct access to daily microfilm copies of all incoming, outgoing, and transiting telegraphs via the Western Union and its associates, RCA and ITT. Operation Shamrock lasted well into the 1960s when computerized operations, Harvest specifically, made it possible to search for keywords rather than read through all the communication. So you know how they a couple of years back they had online, you know, a list of keywords that could um, put you on a targeted list of
Yeah.
potential terrorists. So they are searching for keywords, and they've been doing that probably back in the 40s and 50s. Project Shamrock became so successful that in 1966, the NSA and CIA set up a front company in Lower Manhattan, where the offices of the telegraph companies were located under the code name LP Medley. At the height of Project Shamrock, 15,000 messages
150,000.
150,000 messages a month were printed and analyzed by NSA agents. In May 1975, however, congressional critics began to investigate and expose the program. As a result, NSA Director Lou Allen terminated it. The testimony of both the representatives from the cable companies and of Director Allen at the hearings prompted Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Senator Frank Church to conclude that Project Shamrock was probably the largest government interception program affecting Americans ever undertaken.
Of course, nowadays we can look at the actual wiretapping from the NSA on everything and say that, yeah, it's not the biggest one anymore. And it's interesting to look at the different time back in 1966, or, as the years kept going. In May 1975, whenever they started to attack this thing, it's interesting that they actually did. To look at, today, it's just basically met with indifference, and everybody says, well, it's for your security, so you got to deal with it. We're looking at, May 1975, this Senator Frank Church, a senator, was actually attempting to dismantle this thing, and ended up actually managing to do it. They created the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, which for the first time outlined what the NSA was not permitted to do. The new statute outlawed wholesale warrantless acquisition of raw telegrams, such had been provided under Shamrock. It also outlawed the arbitrary compilation of watch lists containing names of Americans. Under FISA, a secret federal court was set up, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, in order for the NSA to target an American citizen or permanent resident alien, a green card holder, within the United States. A secret warrant was supposed to be obtained by the court. Now, this seemed to have worked for a while, but obviously nowadays it doesn't seem to be the case that anybody even cares about this. And William Benny talked about the court. He, in case anybody doesn't know, is a whistleblower from before Snowden, quite a while before Snowden, actually. He came out in October 2001. So, like, way before Snowden, this guy had created the Thin Thread, I should say. And this project was designed to, how should I put this? It was designed to parse the data that the NSA was receiving and process it automatically to look for keywords that would, provide, say, somebody talking about actually creating some sort of terrorist plot, etc. And it was a very efficient program, and what he talked about was some of the corruption within the NSA. That what they did was they ended up terminating the project because they actually repurposed it to look through Americans' data, which is one of the reasons why he resigned. And he resigned along with Thomas Drake and a guy named Weebly. I can't ever pronounce his name every time I look at it. These three guys were actually attacked by the United States, legally as much as they possibly could. They tried to get them for treason. They had to, hire lawyers to try and defeat this thing. They did manage to do it, but now they're broke and like working normal type jobs after working for the NSA. But at any rate, Thin Thread was designed to parse the data. Now, it was so efficient, and it was designed so that you could only get at data if it found something, and then only the people who should be looking at that particular information. The way the NSA was doing it, which he talked about, was that they didn't even like the Thin Thread very much because it was so efficient that they wanted to pay a whole bunch of people to basically sit around and do the data themselves that they were pulling in. And mind you, this is 2001. They had basically went ahead and, how should I put this? They basically tapped into the mainframe of the internet, and they're basically pulling in everything. Now, whether or not because that little piece of information that I think Snowden was the first one that said exactly that. What William Benny was saying, that they basically They have, agreements with all the major telephone companies, which includes Verizon, which includes Sprint. There was only one. He had discussed this at length, but I don't remember which one it was. There was one phone company that had stood up to them, and they got about a lot of legal trouble for trying to say no to the NSA, saying that it was, not any of their business what their customers were talking about on their phone lines. But the other big companies went quite along with it, and they allowed the NSA to take all the information, anything that their customers said was being sent directly to the NSA. And I should reiterate that Google and Facebook are this is very interesting because you start to look into this. Like Facebook has monetary ties to the CIA and the FBI and the NSA. Very interesting. So is the previous version of Facebook, which would be turned to MySpace, that also has ties to the NSA, monetary ties. So you're looking at the money trails. So you look at this and you say, well, if they're mining all of this data, who does it go to? Who gets this information? And one of the major people that takes all the information is the NSA. And they can use, in theory, they can use this thin thread to parse it. Now, thin thread was discontinued. Like I said, it was too good, to pull through all this data they're getting from, Verizon and Sprint and all these big companies and Facebook or whatever, regardless of whether or not they're actually pulling in all data from the internet at all times, which I don't think that they quite have the capabilities for doing, perhaps, although we might find that is actually the case. But they're pulling in all the major data from everyone, and then they were supposed to be parsing it through a program that only looked at relevant keywords, and then it was basically a targeted approach, and you defined your zones of suspicion around bad people like terrorists, gun smugglers, any kind of criminal activity, and then you could define a zone of suspicion around the person, and then it's just something that they're guilty. You're just looking at them to see if they're participating or not, and they would have gone all the way back to 1990. But you could watch them and see whether or not they were going to do anything and whether or not you could try to stop them. So what they were trying to do, this targeted approach, and it was also designed so that they only flagged certain people, right? And they looked at the zones of reasonable suspicion, so they couldn't have to go outside of that area of expertise. Like they didn't try to go after innocent people or whatever, or like just look up random people's thing. Like, it's been known now that the NSA, some people in the NSA will actually look up like to see if their wife or their husband is cheating. That's a gross misuse of power. Absolutely.
It really is.
And it's kind of ridiculous that they can get away with this kind of stuff. I mean, you might hear about it and then maybe one of them gets shut down for it. But for the most part, I mean, you can't imagine that if they have access to all of this, that they could do this. Now, the NSA doesn't use this targeted approach because of money, because it costs, and this is what William Benny, like, I'll just quote him here. He says, money. He's like, because it costs about 100 times as much to do the bulk act as it does to do the targeted approach. Because if you're looking at the targeted approach, there is no reason to give up privacy for security at all. Never has been. If they did a targeted approach, they wouldn't take in your data, and you would have privacy. They could be focused, and they could succeed in stopping attacks. That's the whole point. But that's not the option they took, because they want to spend $6 to $7 to $10 billion a year on just collecting the data, because they're collecting the data and they're paying people to look through that, because they have the contractors, and then they have the analysis and storage of all that data, and they're paying their individuals, their people within the system to look at this data with their actual eyes, as opposed to having a system that would just flag relevant things. They're not that efficient. That's something that we should take into account here. When we look at the government, we say, oh, their spying program is so efficient. Well, not really, because and William Benny was saying, it was so corrupt. It was one of the other reasons that he left, because he was like, listen, I can't take this anymore. This is inept. Like, these people are spending so much money to just get and store all this information, but they're also paying people to look through it manually when we have computer systems that could do it for you and only give you the stuff that actually matters, so therefore everybody else gets left alone. So that's something that should be understood. So you can't say that they're so dangerous that we can't hide anything, but at the same time, if they want to get you, they can trump up anything because they're storing all this information, right? And the federal laws now are so convoluted and so ridiculous that basically every person on the face of the United States, it's pretty easy to break like 6 or 7 federal laws by breakfast or by lunchtime or by dinner. Maybe you've broken 14 or something, because that's just how convoluted the laws are. Like you could be doing anything and it could somehow be illegal. And somehow they might find out about it through Facebook or through maybe your phone or whatever. And if they were looking at you and they decided to actually do straight up surveillance on you, technically they have the ability to just record your phone through your phone, and eavesdrop on conversations that you're having around the phone, as long as you don't have the battery pulled, even if the phone is off. So, and the RFID technology, I'm sure people have seen that they can remotely capture your credit card information and such. I mean, that's definitely true. So if they are looking at somebody that they've targeted, they decide that they want to take down for whatever reason, they can find trumped up charges and they can make them. They don't have to have a warrant to look at it and find that, and then they can get a warrant because they could say, well, we know this guy broke this law, and you could just be somebody like Crystal or I, who are all we're trying to do is put forth, the truth and our search for it, and trying to show people that there's all kinds of things out there, besides like what we're told, and they could come after us and find some trumped up charges, even if we're not even doing anything wrong. They could find some trumped up charges that you broke some federal law somewhere and somehow you have to pay. And then then even if you can defeat it in court, which you probably could, but you're spending all this money and effort to get a lawyer and try to defend yourself from something that's basically doesn't mean anything, and you weren't even doing anything wrong to begin with, but you were a threat to the system. So this is something that affects us all. But Snowden wasn't the first one to come out with this, and nor was the first program, nor was it the first program to do this. And I've heard it being said that they actually had the technology before 9/11 to do this, but they were using the thin thread, and as soon as the 9/11 broke and they didn't have a reason, like in other words, then the Patriot Act came out, they basically rewrote the book and threw that that secret federal court out the window, and basically said, well, we can do it to anyone now because we can just claim anyone's a terrorist, and it doesn't matter where in the world they are. It doesn't matter if you're a United States citizen or not. They can go after you for that, which is kind of ridiculous, kind of horrible, not so great at all. And I think that that's something that it should be understood that, like I said, Snowden isn't the first one to come out with this information. They've been doing it for a while now, and Snowden just kind of popularized it. And I want to contrast, what happened to William Benny and Drake and Weebly, whenever they came out. They were attacked. They were attacked legally, and they had to spend a whole lot of money and go broke trying to, defend themselves. And they did manage to do it. Drake almost went, but they managed to get the case dropped before that happened. But look at what Snowden came out with this. Like he attempts to disappear, and you had people like William Benny saying like, hey, he's a brave dude, but he'll probably end up being suicided or being renditioned and captured, because you really can't go anywhere in the world where the United States doesn't have some kind of pull. And if they want you that badly, like they were talking about it, like if you watch the politicians and they said, well, Snowden is a traitor and needs to die, and that was something that was actually said, which is ridiculous. And in a country that supposedly did reform laws in order to protect whistleblowers, I mean, that's all a joke. William Benny and Drake and Weebly tried many times to go through the proper channels over and over and over again and it's documented, to expose that this is ridiculous and they shouldn't be doing it and it's unconstitutional, etc., etc. And they were completely ignored or marginalized. And then the system knew what they were trying to do. And then what happens is they try to leave and they're attacked for it. They're attacked for blowing the whistle. But that didn't happen to Snowden. There was a lot of talk about going after Snowden, but nobody ever did a thing. And he's sitting over there in Russia. I mean, now, and before he was in Hong Kong. And technically, in theory, those are two of the enemy, quote unquote, of this particular country at this current time. So it's very interesting to see where he went and how he was not captured, even when the cabal, which was supposed to be angry with him, actually has full-on authority all over the world. I mean, if you look at the guy, I can't remember his name, but he blew the whistle on the CIA's drug trade, and he was a reporter. He blew the whistle on it. He ended up suicided. He ended up dead. He ended up dead with shotgun wounds, and technically, it would have been really extremely hard for him to suicide from them. So it's kind of ridiculous to look at. That guy blew a whistle on something huge, and Snowden technically did as well, and he really popularized it. He brought it to the forefront of the public media. And I apologize if there's noise in the background. My cats are in the other room, and they're trying to get out, and they make a lot of noise. So I hope nobody can hear that.
They're
Just putting
cute.
that out there. Yeah, they are, but they're also trying to disrupt the live broadcast. So at
I
any
had
rate, that's where I was going with that for the time being. I wanted, to bring you now, Crystal, because I know you have things to say about all this.
I do. I've found a lot of research over the past week. Like this article from Sybil Edmonds of Boiling Frogs Post. Mr. Snowden, it's time to come out and take a stand publicly as to your intentions. You were discussing earlier about how he had went to China and Russia and all these other places. If the being that the United States has such an overreach of power, if they wanted him, they could get him, is my opinion.
Yes.
So it makes me wonder, who is he really working for? And we'll get into that later on, I suppose. I'm going to read a little bit from this because I have a lot of deep respect for Sybil Edmonds. I think she is a true whistleblower, and I don't feel like she's working for an agenda. So let me go on with this. A week
Please
ago,
do.
I began writing a series of commentaries on significant consequences and conflicts of interest associated with Glenn Greenwald, his new PayPal billionaire boss, and the ownership and commodities of the 50,000 page incriminating documents obtained and released by NSA's Edward Snowden. In my series, I solely focused on serious ethical questions and consequential conflicts of interest, matters that have remained unasked and unanswered with regards to the recent joint venture between Greenwald and Omadar, dubious and lucrative book and movie deals with mainstream corporations under the premise of exclusive document release, and our government's sudden and unexplained change in its stand and modus operandi. Up to this point, I have left the topic of Mr. Snowden pretty much untouched, and here is why. To date, after 6 months of intense and nonstop mainstream media coverage, and that's right, what we're hearing is Snowden, Snowden, Snowden. We're not really, the information is a slow drip. And in my opinion, it's being implemented to try to change the people's viewpoints on situations such as Israel and Palestine, Iran, Syria, things like that. It's being used as a control mechanism and putting this fella in the spotlight while mainly ignoring the real whistleblowers. That's kind of discouraging. But let me continue. To date, after the 6 months of intense and nonstop mainstream media coverage of the Snowden NSA topic, very little is known about Mr. Snowden himself. And this includes his real intentions and objectives, the nature and details of his deals and agreements with members of the press, including those made with Glenn Greenwald, and his position on the latest developments, which include the exclusive business deal struck between Greenwald and billionaire Omadar, $1 million book. So they're making money off of this. They're not, and one thing that I firmly believe in personally is that the truth should always be free. It should always be free, regardless.
Yes.
We're not selling truth here. We're not, Hollywood sells sensationalism and packages it as truth. Because, if you hype up something enough, people are going to start to listen. And that's what I feel like Snowden's been from the start, is just a hyped up, controlled opposition psychological operation on the people. Um, I hate to sound so forceful about it, but you really have to look into it and kind of think about, well, how are these other whistleblowers being treated? Are they getting the same attention? No, they're not. And so follow the money. And here we have where they did business deals behind $1 million book, movie deals like Citizen 4, and all this hype. Um,
Yeah.
So you have to take in consideration what is his intention, what is his intentions, and I think this article here really addresses that. It asks the questions that we need to ask. Um, let's see, movie deals made based on exclusive publication of some of the leaked documents, and the highly mysterious change of position, the flip flopping in the government's stand and response in the midst of all the publicity and commoditization of the controversial leaked NSA cache. During the past 6 months, I have been asked more than 100 times by the media and general public where I stand on this Snowden NSA case. My response up to this point so far has been rather vague and generalized. I consider whistleblowers who risk everything to raise public awareness and publicize criminality heroes, true heroes. I have always admired and supported real whistleblowers, those who have sacrificed not making money and put everything at risk for the public's benefit, good, and people's right to know. These courageous individuals need our support and backing. As for Mr. Snowden, for me, it's still too early in the game to form a concrete opinion and or pass judgment, because there's so much we don't know due to intentional efforts to withhold, obscure, spin, commoditize, and misuse the involved facts. Only Mr. Snowden's public stand and his clear statement in response to the recent convoluted developments can clarify these issues and questions and bring out the truth. Only then I, as a whistleblower, can form and express a concrete opinion and position. The position stated above in her article sums up her current opinion and answer on Mr. Snowden. However, now, after I have put forth serious questions and implications involved in how this so-called whistleblowing matter is being handled and misused, with all the public confusion and polarization these questions are causing, I must insist and invite Mr. Snowden to come out publicly, and I think that he should also. He should come out publicly and take a stand on, what are his intentions and why the business deals. Why are you making money off the truth is what I'd like to know.
Yeah.
Anyone. I question anyone that's making money off of selling truth, which should be a natural right to all people
Yes.
to be able to access that information and to not have any kind of misunderstanding or misconstruing things and a general confusion. And it is a confusion. The deeper you get into this, the more you see the disinformation, misinformation, lies, and treachery.
Yes.
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to throw in really quick that when he did that live interview on a green screen supposedly from Hong Kong, with Greenwald, he was on a first off, like, where does this guy get a green screen at such short notice when he's supposed to be in hiding? Very suspicious.
Right.
They also were trying to plug. They also were trying to plug. They were also trying to plug. Google. Like, they were saying, well, encryption's the key, and let's use Google. But Google is totally in bed with these people. I mean, they can't operate. I mean, just like that little phone company that told the government basically to screw off. They got hammered as much as they possibly could, and I think they're out of business now. I think they've been out of business for years, or they got ate up by one of the other bigger companies. So, dude, you gotta find out. when you look into Google, is that Google, is obviously selling this information. So when they say it's encrypted, is it encrypted from everyone? Is it encrypted to third parties, or is it only encrypted to people, who are little people? In other words, like us. Is it encrypted to other people trying to hack your information, but at the same time the NSA gets all of it? Which is very interesting. And when Snowden's plugging this, and it was one of the first times, it was right after Google Hangouts had just come out, and they used Google Hangouts to do this. I mean, it just seems like a shameless advertisement for it. And like I said, there's red flags popping up all over the place when you look at him, because, like, what is his intentions? What are they exactly? I mean, he's then talking about, like, trying to release information about how the U.S. does cyber attacks against China later on. And that's also, like, a big red flag. Why is he talking about that when, the real core issue that he left for, in theory, was to focus on what the United States is doing to its own citizens? I mean, I'm an anarchist, so I don't think any of this crap should be happening. But it's ridiculous to think that Snowden's going to be leaking information to these foreign countries, from a patriot standpoint, because I'm not a patriot, by the way, at all. But, from a patriot standpoint, that should be a massive red flag for everybody. So, like, it's kind of ridiculous to me at all to try to, suggest that, Snowden is anything but a very strange figure coming from where he's at all over the place. I mean, there's so much that we've already brought up that covers a lot of that. And he was also like CIA as well. He wasn't just NSA. He was CIA because he was supposed to be a contractor and he moved around. And there's also this interesting thing when we were talking about the corruption involved, and they're trying to take all this money. They're trying to get as much money as they possibly can for their particular branch. Well, the NSA surpasses the CIA and the rest of the like spy companies, or alphabet soup companies, as I like to call them. The NSA takes in more money than they do. Let's see, in April, as part of its 2014 budget request, the Pentagon, which rules the NSA, asked Congress for $4.7 billion for increased cyberspace operations, nearly $1 billion more than the 2013 allocation. At the same time, budgets for the CIA and other intelligence agencies were cut by almost the same amount, $4.4 billion. And the portion of the money going to the NSA would be used to create 13 cyber attack teams. So you're looking at a turf war between the NSA and the CIA. Suppose the people at the CIA, who true genuine experts, carefully over time were able to access those NSA documents and hand them over to Snowden, or potentially at length, or showed Snowden how to execute the quite sophisticated piece of access trickery. Because, more believably, the NSA's internal security was very good. It wasn't, far less believably, a bumble bum of mismanaged amateur clockwork. It was tight, so tight that a man like Snowden wouldn't have been able to move through it like a ghost. The CIA, of course, couldn't be seen as the NSA leaker. They needed the guy. They needed the guy who would have first appeared to be from the NSA, who could make things far worse for the NSA and shield the CIA. They had Edward Snowden. He had worked in the CIA in Geneva, in a high-level position, overseeing the computer system security. So perhaps this, CIA libertarian, quote-unquote, Snowden, meets a fellow CIA guy who says, things will go too far. We have all this stuff going on. Let's leak all this. I'm going to give you stuff, and we're going to try to see if we can leak this information. Very interesting idea. This actually comes from John Report's blog. He has an article on, this because the CIA actually denied a Freedom of Information Act request for information on Snowden, which I think is extremely interesting. The letter to the guy who requested it, because it was filed on November 15th, I think it was 2014. But it was filed by this guy named John Young, owner of Cryptome.org. The CIA's response, dated December 29th, refers to Young's query seeking records granting Edward Joseph Snowden access to classified information, and records indicating Mr. Snowden's compliance with controls of classified information upon leaving the CIA. The letter reads, "The CIA can neither confirm nor deny the existence or non-existence of records responsive to your request." And the letter states that any other response would violate rules governing classification of data. Bottom line, CIA has nothing specific to say about Snowden's status while he worked for the agency. So who is this guy? Again, who is this guy who gets all this media attention? There's virtually very little media attention for the original whistleblowers who brought out the new NSA spying program. And here we have this guy that you mentioned, is making money off of this kind of a thing, and like I said, he's plugging Google, and he's basically touting a company that's got a backdoor the size of, I don't know, half the world, Google, just directly to the NSA, to the spying apparatus of the United States government. And so we're looking at this and we're supposed to trust Google's encryption, but you're plugging this brand new thing that they've got, and you were originally working for the people who technically already own that information. I think it's kind of ridiculous, actually, to suggest that this is anything but a kind of a ridiculous psyop. And it's sold in such a way that we're not really paying attention to the little details. We're sold, and it's another thing that's very interesting about it is we have this. We have these people who actually were genuine, who came out and who got destroyed for it. And this guy's getting all this publicity, and he's making money off of it. And then this is all coming out like piecemeal. Like, you don't see it as it happens. You only see the media attention and like the politicians attacking him and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of ridiculous how this is handled. Like I said, these other guys, like, they were denounced and they were attacked, but they were marginalized as well. They weren't allowed, they weren't allowed as much media attention. They weren't given it when they came out. They got a lot more once Snowden came out. But the guy William Benny also said that he thinks that the whole leaking of information to China, or the leaking of information about the attacks against the Chinese via cyber warfare between the USSA and these other two countries, was borderline, because we're talking about William Benny here, who would probably be more of a patriot. He's like, this is borderline treason that they would put out that information, because it's not something that is anything to do with the domestic spying on the American people. And why is he only leaking these certain things when he was supposedly got away with all like tons and tons of his classified documents? He's only releasing certain things, and he's only timing these releases for certain ways. I mean, is that, like, why is this the case that's going on? Why is it not that they're just putting out all the information and let us go through that as human beings, as the individuals? Like you said, information should be released. It does not seem at all like that's the case of what they want, that they're trying very hard to do some kind of a crazy thing with this. It's like all over the place. Like, you can't look at just Snowden and say, well, I know what he's up to. Like, you have to look at all these different things that he's done and how it's all related. And like you were saying, like his Greenwald's new boss, is extremely wealthy. Why did all this happen at the same exact time? And then the other interesting thing is, like, I noticed that, like, when Snowden came out, there were all these banners and all this messages and all this publicity online all of a sudden, instantaneously, for this guy. And like I said, William Benny and Thomas Drake and Webley, I always have to correct that. They didn't get any of that. They were attacked, maligned. They were torn down for it. It seems to be all some kind of controlled opposition stunt. It's kind of ridiculous and very sad, but it looks like a controlled opposition stunt. It sounds like a controlled opposition front. So if it quacks like a duck and acts like a duck, maybe it's a duck. Let's not follow along that anymore. Like, that's probably what it is.
I think so too. And Sybil Edmonds had a lot of great questions that she put forth, like towards Mr. Snowden. And I hope my volume's a little bit better. I tried to work with it while you were speaking. What was your foremost intention for making the decision to obtain thousands of documents that implicated the United States government? What was your foremost intention for actually taking the action following your decision and obtaining these documents? At the time when you were obtaining the documents, did you target particular categories of implicating documents or did you just grab everything you could? If you vetted the documents or the specific categories of documents beforehand and then went about obtaining them, then why would you ask journalists to vet and make personal judgments on which ones to release or which ones to withhold permanently? If you didn't vet the documents prior to obtaining them, and if you ask particular journalists to vet them and decide what to release and what to withhold, did you make any demands to ensure that you were part of that vetting process and that they had to have your consent? If you didn't vet the documents prior to obtaining them, and if you asked particular journalists to vet them and decide what to release and what to withhold, did you also ask them to have meetings with United States and UK government agencies and have those who were actually implicated in your documents call the shots on what to withhold and what to release? So he's letting I kind of question whether he vetted these documents himself.
Yep.
It makes me wonder, It's so, like I said earlier, the more that you look at this, the more of a circle jerk it seems to me. Really. To put it mildly,
That's great.
to put it as kindly as I can, that's what it seems like. And you are right on point with how he has gotten so much publicity. It kind of seems to me like he was groomed for this because he does look like the perfect, cyber tech dude.
Yeah.
He's got the look for it, and that he was groomed. Now, I read somewhere a while back where it seemed like he was reading from a script when he was doing these interviews.
Probably was.
And then you're talking about a green screen. This is an actor. This could possibly be an actor.
Hollywood has pulled off much bigger stunts than that. I mean, almost all the news we see today, or a lot of it anyway, is filmed in front of a green screen as it is. And that's not something that's talked about at all, but that's a topic for another show.
Well, we have a lot of activists that film in front of green screens too.
Yeah.
And do
although some of them,
theater.
If you're not running from the law and releasing all these, quote unquote, releasing all these documents that are somehow groundbreaking, even when they've already been put forward, that's not such a hair raising thing, as far as like one person having the access to a green screen and having a little bit of a studio. That's something that's within my reach if I saved up some money. So that's not necessarily that big of a deal then, but you're looking at Snowden, who's supposed to be this dude on the run, and he doesn't even look like he's tired or on the run at all when he's doing these interviews. He looks so fresh and clean. He's almost too young and too good looking. Because if you look at William Benny, now the guy is like walking around with crutches. He has some kind of a medical condition now, and he can't even walk without crutches. So it's actually really, really sad to look at how this whole thing has attacked them, has messed with them. I guess it was diabetes that took his legs. I just had to look that up because I forgot how that happened. They went into his house and searched his house, the FBI. Whenever he went through, whenever he got out, they were serious about doing everything they could to silence this guy, to get him to recant his statement, to get him into prison, to be able to call him a traitor, all this stuff. And they failed because these guys were smart and they were able to use the lawyers and stuff like that, and they weren't stupid about it. But look at Snowden. He's a fresh young guy coming out of the closet, somehow got his hands on all this ridiculously classified information, and he's leaking them all over the place, and he escapes. They couldn't find him before that happened. You're trying to tell me that they couldn't get him in Hong Kong? Because Hong Kong wouldn't necessarily be that hard to do a rendition. It might be one thing to do it in Russia, because you're quote unquote in enemy territory, when you don't consider that all these countries are part of the cabal to begin with. But and because they're all working together behind the scenes, They are. I mean, I know to a lot of people that Putin seems like a good guy, but if you look at the laws that he's passing, how draconian he is about a lot of things, I don't trust Putin. I don't trust him at all. I don't trust any politician. I mean, maybe that's just my anarchist side, but
There's
I
nothing wrong
can't.
with that either.
I can't trust them.
I love
I can't
it.
trust any of them. The only one that I even slightly trust is Ron Paul, but that's because he spent the last 40 years saying the same stuff, and he doesn't want to rule over you. He just, he was just in politics to try to raise awareness. It looks like. I mean, the more I look at the guy, I see like a tried and true closet anarchist who's, involved just to try to get people's awareness to the fact that this whole system doesn't work,
Right.
and we're seeing these psyops because they're trying to keep us distracted from that. Very interesting.
Yeah, and if I recall reading somewhere that Hong Kong was like a CIA hotspot, like that you had so many agents over there anyway. So how do we know that Edward Snowden isn't working for the enemy, but
Yep.
he's appearing to the public as a hero? This NSA is supposed to be one of the most secretive spying agencies in the world. However, a young guy can come in there with a thumb drive, plug it in, and steal everything. It doesn't seem plausible to me. It really doesn't.
It's a tall tale. It's a very tall tale. Like I said, I can't accept it either. I mean, there's so much within that vein, you can go to. I think we have about let's see here. We got about probably about 6 minutes or less before the break in the center. Is there anything you want to put up about Snowden and the PSYOP before we hit the break?
Um, well, not really. Not really.
Not really.
Not
Okay.
really. I mean, we can come back to it after the break. That'll be just fine.
All right. See what I'm looking for. Oh, and by the way, this is very interesting because we were talking about the reforms about because there's this thing called the Whistleblower Protection Act or whatever. Yeah, but that didn't they didn't do anything for Thomas Drake. It didn't do anything for William Benny. They were retaliation. They were retaliated against very hardcore. It was very sad what happened to them. And why they went after them so hard, but like I said, there's a red flag there because they're not going after Snowden like that. It's kind of ridiculous, actually, when you see how this goes. And you look at, that's what the CIA, who Snowden worked for, CIA is their speciality is psychological operations and PSYOPs. And that's what they do. And then so, I guess after the break, we'll also have to get into, Cass Sunstein and WikiLeaks. We'll also get into more about Edward Snowden, but I do want to tie this into some of the other things that I think are big psyops, like the Panama Papers. WikiLeaks has done some semi-decent things, but they how do I even put that? I mean, they follow the money. They don't seem to be that genuine, especially with all the publicity. The same kind of thing that Snowden kind of did, and they still haven't been gotten by anybody. There's all this big hullabaloo about how they're not being they're not being allowed to go and seek asylum elsewhere where they might be slightly free. And then there's also, like I said, the money trail with Facebook and Google to find out that where are they actually getting all this information from that they're storing. I mean, do they actually have the pipelines that were quote unquote whistleblowed by Snowden that are supposedly tied into the main lines, maybe even fiber optic lines, and they're sucking up everything? Or is it that they just have these backdoor deals, which are known about and are proved, with all these big companies where they basically say, well, it's national security. We need everything your customers talk about. So we have the Panama Papers. We have Anonymous, another huge red flag for me. Like Anonymous, I do not trust at all. And I know a lot of people that do. I mean, they seem like they're doing some good on the surface, but they're really not. I really want to tie these things together because if we're looking for PSYOPs and we're talking about Snowden, then when we see all the red flags with him, there's a bunch of different red flags with the rest of these as well. And I'm sure that there's some that I'm missing. But we're specifically talking about like these particular kinds of PSYOPs where they seem to be releasing things or seem to be doing things, but at the same time, they're really not harming the United States all that much. They're more or less harming normal individual people. Or they're harming their quote-unquote enemies, because it's all like this game where you have Team Russia over here and Team China over here, and you got the Team USA and Team NATO, and it's like they're all football players on the field, except that actual people die when they
Right.
clash. And I mean, if you look at it from the perspective that they're all controlled by the same uh, shady group of individuals who may or may not be even slightly known about in the public eye. And I don't necessarily mean the Rockefellers. I'm talking about the very, very top of the pyramid that we'll never see because they're so well hidden. And that's they spent their entire lives, which might have been very, very long. Who knows? They spent their entire lives hiding, and what they do is they pull the strings behind the curtain. We will.
All right.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. At any rate, we're going to a break, so we're going to get into all that as soon as we get back. Thank you all for listening. Hello, and welcome back, everyone, to Revising Reality. We are actually, and I lost completely my train of thought. That was just great. Anyhow, let's all laugh at me, and it'll be a lot of fun. Crystal, I want to hear your voice. How are you doing again? Are you on mute? Because I can't hear you at all. Crystal. Oh, all right. Anyhow, so I was just looking into a couple of things on the back door of the show. Now I can hear you, but you're very quiet.
I'm not sure what it is with the Skype, and I really don't want to play with it too much more, or else you won't be able to hear me at all.
Actually, you sound a lot better now.
Okay. So I can see the little bar going up in the volume. I'm not going to touch this sound option again right now. While we were in the break, I found a really great article from John Rappaport that was listed on the website Activist Post. And it goes into detail about CIA denying requests for a FOIA on Edward Snowden. That's kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, I think I might have mentioned that.
I believe you did too.
Article as well. I didn't really go that far into it. I only mentioned the top part of that. The other thing that I found was interesting is that I was looking into whether or not that there is a backdoor directly as I was talking about for Google and such. I do know that Al Jazeera, which by the way, they're one of the news sources that does seem to actually go after anybody. They don't seem to be as controlled as the rest of them. I know that they have a negative connotation within the states for being quote unquote, sort of a, how should I even put that? They're more well, they originate from the Middle East. So at any rate, there's that connotation there, but that's one of the things that you might want from a news agency that might actually want to criticize your own government. They might be controlled and do things from a different perspective. Like say Russia Today, which is also, they put out misinformation, but they're also again about Russia, but they're extremely hard on the United States. So if you're looking for stuff to contradict normal media sources, you look to these other ones, but you have to understand that they're generally, they're playing for a different team. They're still playing for a team, but they're playing for a different team. So you can probably get some interesting information out there, like when Russia Today actually aired the documentary Financial Tyranny, which David Wilcock put together or was involved in making that. And they actually aired that on the air in front of the whole world, and it was exposing the Federal Reserve and the whole entire thing there. So that's interesting, but at the same time, the United States will publish information through their media, which they have a lot more media, but they will put out information on their media that attacks Russia and so on and so forth. And so we're seeing this play out, with Edward Snowden as well, as the controlled opposition continues to roll out. But I did find that Al Jazeera put forth this article, and they have a lot of there's actually hard copy emails that show a very cozy, very, very cozy relationship between Google and the NSA. Now, the relationship between Google and the NSA, Google shot down over and over and over again, saying there's no way that the NSA could get their could get their information, could get your information. They can only do it whenever they're actually attacked under a court of law and told to release that information. I think it's all a bunch of hullabaloo. There's these emails that suggest they're they're attending meetings together. They're doing all kinds of very interesting stuff. And these emails were obtained under a Freedom of Information Act request. So it's very interesting that this is going on. Now you also have this public thing with, like I said, Google's vehemently denying this. But then it comes out that they have all these emails that have been going on for a year. It happened. The emails actually were dated a year before Snowden was even blowing this wide open. So they came out and said, "Oh, it's a lie. It's a lie. We're not doing this." But do you really trust them? Do you really trust them? Do you really trust Google? Because I don't trust Google. There's information saying that the NSA is into the actual phone's operating systems to begin with, and when we talk about them being able to tap into any phone without even needing to be turned on, there's got to be some hardware and there's got to be some software there that would facilitate that sort of a thing. And that might be one of the big things that they're trying to stop people now. Like Verizon has been very anti all throughout Android's history, even though Android is a very open source operating system. Verizon has been locking bootloaders for a long time and trying to hamper that effort. A lot of the newer phones, some of them they haven't broken yet. A lot of the new Samsung phones. If so, I wonder if they're trying to stop people from figuring out these backdoors, and then implementing something within a ROM, within a custom operating system to be able to stop them from doing at least the software. Because you'd have to find the hardware in order to get rid of that, and then you'd have to not fry the phone to get rid of it. Also playing out in the public scene right now, recently we have the FBI which tried to use a court order, or no, they tried to get a court to order Apple to build them a back door. Now, interesting, because earlier I had mentioned the turf war, quote unquote, between the CIA and the NSA. And here's the FBI, which would also be part of this turf war because their funding would have been cut as well. They're asking this federal court or whatever it is to. It's been a little while since I've seen that move. Seen that information, because that was like 2 months ago or something, or 3 months. But they were asking the court to make Apple, or they asked Apple to make them the back door in their system for FBI specifically, and Apple of course said no. And Apple has trying to deny knowledge of NASA's or NSA's iPhone backdoor, but yet there has been this. That there is a risk of spilling out data. There is a backdoor in the system in iOS, and it's been there for a while. And if they do get rid of one of them, there's more than likely that they'll just put a different one in, and then somebody would have to work hard to find it. There was this guy that named ZDZIARSKI, so Ziriarski, and he's like, I don't buy it for a minute that these services are intended solely for diagnostics. The data that they leak is of extreme personal nature. There is no notification to the user. A real diagnostic tool would have been engineered to respect the user, prompt them like applications do for access to data, and respect backup encryption. So what he found was that this diagnostic tool was transmitting all of this information somewhere. He's not necessarily accusing them of been working with the NSA. He's saying it may have been the case, but he's just saying that this is actually happening. That this debugging system is sending out all this information, and it's sending it to somebody, and somebody could come in there and get it. But of course, Apple denies this as well. They have to, because if they actually admitted it, it would be pretty ugly for them. It'd be ugly for Google if people started paying attention to what they're doing and how cozy they are with NSA, even though they try to pretend they're not. So we have these back doors being built into their systems, and they're in all our phones, because most people, unless you can get your hands on a Ubuntu phone, or you decide to root a specific phone and put Ubuntu on it, because there is a phone operating system for that's based on Linux kernel. But I don't think it's and it's it's not Google's. but I'm not sure how that project's coming along. It's been a while since I looked at it, whether or not they finished it. That would potentially be secure. But then again, I mean, if they can get their hands on all the rest of this stuff, it's very possible that they, get their hands on that as well eventually. I know that the newer versions of it's been said that I remember reading about that too. It's been said that the newer versions of Linux, not all of them are completely secure, at least against the NSA type stuff. I know that the older versions of Linux are very airtight, but I personally don't use them because I do a lot of stuff on my Windows computer that I've taken Windows 10, and there's a lot of steps you can do to like seal up a lot of different backdoors. Whether or not they can still get into my computer is an open question. It's more than likely that they can. If you protect yourself against the VPN and you pay attention to using sources of encryption that are outside of the mainstream programs and the mainstream providers, you could probably avoid getting caught a lot. With whatever it is that you're doing, that breaking some federal law you don't even know about, because obviously most people are going to be innocent of doing any serious harm to anyone at all. But then again, I'm using Facebook to promote my show, and obviously that is a complete data mine scam. They're collecting everything that comes out of that, and they're getting a lot of extremely personal data from Facebook. So when you post your job on there and you post all this kind of stuff, they know, and if you post anything political on it, then yeah, they know where you stand. They know that I'm an anarchist. I'm probably not on a watch list, however, because I'm small. I'm a small fish. I don't have a large following. That's potential to change, but I doubt that I'm on too big of a list at the moment for them to be trying to jump up charges and stop me, because there's a lot of people out there now that are really, pushing the truth out. And I think that this is kind of popping up as sort of a grassroots movement, like the anarchist movement, that's starting to gain some speed, even if there's infighting all over the place. And with that, comes, more and more people. So if they want to try to arrest us all, then they're going to have to be, really serious about doing that to everyone. Because there is, I think that the movement is definitely growing. You can protect yourself as much as possible, but the bottom line is, if you're using any of these data mine things, then they already have that information. You either have to take a step to seal that up and no longer use that, or you have to take the risk and use it because it's the best way to promote your show, for example, or whatever. So it's it's an interesting choice. It's an interesting idea. But if what William Benny and Thomas Drake and Webley and I guess even Snowden, whatever, is saying is true, which it is. There's plenty of evidence, like we've just been discussing, like the backdoors and all that stuff, and how they have cozy relationships in the background to giving out all the information for their customers. Like we're talking Verizon, we're talking Sprint, talking AT&T. Now all that information is getting sent to the NSA. They might not be, like I said, they're probably not good enough to look at everything. Like William Benny was saying, they're corrupt and inept, and not they want to get money, so they're not really very good at parsing through the data. But if they decide that they want you, they can easily find the data and easily get it, and just do a search on it through their database and be able to bring that up. And I'm sure it's just as fast as Google, because I've actually heard that they have their own sort of Google going on. So with that being said, I just think we need to be very, very careful. And then here's the other thing. Is there a way that, somebody can start coming up with a way to counter this? Like if they're locking phones, why don't we come up with our own phones? I'm sure that that's a possibility. Look at what Bitcoin has done. Regardless of where it came from, it doesn't seem to be hackable. It's not ability. You can hack sites that put it out. You can hack sites that use it to trading, and you can hack it when the transaction happens. But as far as the actual Bitcoin itself, you can't actually hack that and create more for yourself. It's just really not possible the way it's designed. It's all shrouded in mystery because nobody knows the guy who actually created it. There's stories flying around and he could have been the CIA or whatever, but the currency itself seems sound. If you are interested in the Bitcoin, so that being said, there's got to be a way that somebody smart can come up with a way to counter this. I don't see why we can't find a good alternative to Skype, with its own sort of encryption, a good alternative to, I don't know about social networks, because the very nature of social networks screams data mining. The whole concept does. I don't know how easy that would be to replace, but certainly operating systems on phones and operating systems on computers, there has to be a way to find a way to break that and fix it. There's a lot of people out in the pirate community, and I wish that they were listening to this show. They constantly modify programs in order to make them run. Why can't they find a way to put those skills to good use and start, let's hack Windows and change out all the backdoors and make damn sure that there are none. And that would be a good project for a group to take on, and that would be, people would be clamoring for that. I mean, if you made your own secure version and then like changed it completely, you know what I mean, and then made it streamlined, or you start from scratch or you start from Linux and create another version of Linux that absolutely is airtight and then runs with the latest technology and their latest hardware, so that people aren't stuck with older stuff that can't keep up with the newer computers. Why can't this be done? I mean, there's got to be money in having a genuinely provable encrypted operating system. There's got to be. I mean, people will pay for that. I would pay for that. I've paid for Windows, but do I enjoy their product? I mean, it works. I will have to say that Windows 10 is probably the smoothest operating system I've ever used. But am I really certain that I'm secure? No, not at all. Like I said, I've done all I can to button up all the backdoors that I know about and that I've read about, which was pretty thorough. But at the same time, like I'm still using Facebook. So if they really wanted, to see what I was talking about all the time when I'm researching, they'll find it. And then I guess I'm putting on the show and they can listen to my show. But if they do, hopefully they decide to realize that anarchy is the only way to human freedom eventually.
Yeah, maybe they'll learn something.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I was noticing how you had mentioned alternatives to Skype. Actually, there are alternatives to Skype. Um, they're not well known, and you kind of have to search out these things. Like one, for instance, is Talks.im, and it uses distributed hash tables, torrent-like technology that makes a distributed network. It uses public privacy key cryptography, similar to Bitcoin's. That way, the communication is encrypted end to end, and users negotiate the key exchange rather than the software. And a second one would be Bleep by BitTorrent, which is an E2E encrypted decentralized proprietary chat and voice over internet protocol. It has the most stable Android version that I could test and supports every major operating system except for Linux, unfortunately. Then you have, lastly, in this article that I found, Silent Circle. And there's a two-way encryption privacy protocols widely used today. Anyway, I posted the link for anyone that's interested on my Facebook. Like I posted yesterday about Facebook being started by, it's part of the government surveillance program, connected to DOD and DARPA, PRISM.
Yes.
MySpace was before, and most of all social network media platforms are, as well as the dating sites. They have all your information, your nude pics that you're sending through chat. They have it all. So,
That's just funny.
I'm not too worried about it. I mean,
Whoa.
Things that I don't. Can you hear me?
Now,
yeah, you got me?
now you're really quiet again.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. Are you there?
Yes, but you're still really quiet. You're quieter than you were before.
I'm sorry. It's this microphone. Anyway.
When you pulled off the microphone, it might have actually been better. We want to try that really quick?
Yeah, how about that? Is that better?
Just move closer to the computer then.
Okay. Let's see.
A little bit closer.
I'm sorry about the technical problems today, Tim. I really am.
It happens.
Yeah, as I was saying, how you and I discussed, some of the surveillance problems that I had personally been having. I've come to understand that anything that I don't want someone else to know, I won't put it on Facebook. I won't even mention it on my computer or even around my computer. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure, I'm aware that, I'm being listened to, watched, 24/7. And, privacy is kind of like, uh, it's a fairy tale now for me and
Yeah,
many others. It's a dream.
it
We don't
is.
have it. We don't have any privacy left, and you know those people out there who are targeted individuals who directly have these privacy issues, they probably are more consciously aware of the surveillance problems than many of the average Americans out there. It's unfortunate, that people are the way that they are. You never know if you have an FBI informant that's spying on you, or which one of your friends is secretly working for the CIA. So, I mean, it's I've come to kind of expect not to have any privacy.
Pretty much. I mean, at this point, I don't even care that much. I don't. I just stuff that I don't want anybody to know about. I just don't talk about. Everything else, like if I'm doing research or whatever it is, like I, I can't. I don't really care if they know that I research because anybody would talk to who knows me, in any really way, would know that I have views that are far different than most people, and that I research, the crap out of everything. I don't stop for nothing. I don't really have any any places where I go and say, well, my belief system won't let me question this. No, I'll question everything. I don't care if I'm questioning myself. I don't care if I'm questioning, you know, it doesn't matter what it is. I want to get down to the bottom of it. So it comes down to the thing where what exactly are you trying to protect yourself from them knowing, and then having being wise enough to not post anything about that and not talk about it to anyone unless you're in person. And it depends on how paranoid if you want to go and pull out the battery of your phone before you do. I personally don't think that's fully necessary unless you're actually on some list somewhere. Maybe it is then, but the bottom line is most people, if you have a computer, they probably know an awful lot about you already, and if they really want to find you, they can make charges. They can do that.
Yeah.
So we've only got about half an hour more, plus over half an hour left. Do you want to? We can move on a little bit from Snowden and the cybersecurity snafu that's everywhere. Did you want to bring up anything with WikiLeaks?
Yeah, there's an article that I have that I don't want to take all of our time up reading articles or whatnot. So,
Just do a summarization into WikiLeaks, like what have you learned, and then bring in some of the article, and then we'll move on to the next topic, because I mean all these things tie together because they're all run by the same people.
uh-huh. All right, let's see if I can find. Well, I've got something playing here. Hold on.
So what I've like while you do that, I've been looking at WikiLeaks, and Cass Sunstein, who funded WikiLeaks, is, how do I put this? He's very, very suspect. I don't like him. I don't like the way he looks. I don't like the way he smells. He just doesn't seem to be genuine. And you got to look at like if we look at like how Snowden came out, and we look at how WikiLeaks came out, how Julian Assange, kind of came out. Like I'm not going to say that they haven't leaked some good stuff about like the TPP trade agreement. But there's a few things that they have leaked out. But at the same time, like if they're sitting on all these documents and they're slowly releasing them, like why are they waiting? Why don't they just dump everything and then have people go through kind of like Wikipedia does, and just if you have a bunch of volunteers looking through the data, then they can start flagging it one way or the other, and then they can come to eventually having all the data processed and tagged and put it forth so that people could understand it and be able to see what topics go to where. Like again, like you're seeing like they're the same thing that Snowden was doing, like, oh, we're going to parse through the data and only give you certain things when we feel like we're going to give them to you, like we're only going to share these classified documents whenever we want to. We're not going to share you all of them, and we're going to do what we want. So this is also to me a big red flag when I'm looking at WikiLeaks. And like I said, if you follow the money, Cass Sunstein, I think he's connected to Soros, if I remember properly.
He is.
Yeah, he's not a clean guy,
Mm-mm.
and he has a lot of money. So, I mean, and then again, like, there's really no serious derogatory information about the U.S., UK, or Israel. So,
That should
and
raise a red flag in
yeah,
itself.
yes, it should. Even if, like, I know some people who aren't quite sold on Israel being so evil, quote unquote evil, but it's not the people, it's the government, it's the people in charge. They're not telling you the whole truth when it comes to anything, and that is by their very nature. And it's the same thing here. It's the same thing in the USSA. Same thing in Russia. It's the same thing in the entire Western world and NATO countries. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You know, the people in charge, they don't have your best interest in mind pretty much anywhere. And if they did even want to try to be cool people, you know, chances are the United States went to war and murdered them. So, I mean, if you look at Gaddafi, and Libya was a really nice place beforehand, and now it's just completely destroyed. And they didn't have the central banking system that we have. They had an independent version of it, and they weren't connected to, you know, the big guys. So, you know, it's one of those things where you wonder, why is it that they were, you know, attacked? Like, I mean, they were also building a gold-backed currency for the petrodollar. So if you look at, like, I think WikiLeaks was one of the ones that had gone after. No, it was Anonymous that went after Iran as well, which is interesting because Anonymous is also connected to WikiLeaks. Um, Something to be thinking about. And then another thing, Cass Sunstein, which he wrote, I don't remember where it was. He had written this paper in 2008, I think it was, that was basically putting forth this idea already. And I don't remember where I found that. I want to quote the name of that paper, but I can't remember where it is, which is really annoying. I can't remember where it
I'm
is,
gonna
but
find it for you. Just keep on talking. I'll find it.
okay. At any rate, though, the Sunstein guy, you know, he's very involved with it. He wrote a paper that basically said,
Is it called
what?
Conspiracy Theories with Adrian Vermeil?
No,
Uh,
I can't remember. It was a paper. It was like, you know, a kind of a research paper that he had published, and I think it wasn't even a research paper. It was like an opinion paper that he had published, and it was some kind of like published in some journal, and or and then he basically was suggesting that he wanted the controlled opposition, and that a good way to protecting the government, to protect the secrets, was to release certain things to keep people distracted from researching the things that actually mattered. That was like the summation of the paper. I do remember that very clearly. So then, you know, what is it, a year later or something like that, or it was a couple years after he put this paper out that WikiLeaks comes out, and then he was actually, you know, present for this and helped fund this. Um, like, really? I mean, you want us to buy this story that WikiLeaks is some kind of a savior? Like I said, they haven't really, you know, they're attacking, like, you know, Putin. They're not attacking the United States. They're not attacking the CIA. They are putting out some documents on that, but it looks to me when I go to WikiLeaks page that a lot of that might have been already been known, at least in some circles, especially if you're looking at like one of the original people who was really researching this stuff. Uh, he wrote what is it, the pale, behold the pale horse. Why can't I remember his name? He's so important. William Cooper, yeah, who was
mhm.
murdered. You know, who was murdered. So you're looking at a guy who actually was speaking out about this stuff before anybody even knew it. Um, and then he gets killed, and then you're looking at like Snowden, who knows leaking stuff after
And he's
everybody already
propped
knew
up
it.
by the mainstream media. So
Exactly. He
you
even
kind of
gets
have to
attention
look.
there.
Right. You kind of have to look at how people are being treated that are speaking the truth. The ones that are legit are the ones that are mainly ostracized by their peers, um, and, are threatened. And, like you said, suicided, murdered, left without a leg to stand on, you know.
Yep.
people, but the ones that are actually working within the system that are, controlled opposition, working for, the secret government or whatever, what have you, whatever you want to call
The
it.
deep state, you can call it the deep
Yeah.
state. I usually call it the cabal, but the deep state works as well.
Well, the deep state, those that work for the deep state are the ones that the mainstream media puts on the cover of People magazine, Time
Yep.
magazine, and this is what you're worshiping. You're worshiping
Yeah.
these people who are part of the sinister agenda.
Not to mention that Snowden received indirectly, but he received the Pulitzer Prize through Greenwald and whatever stupid organization he writes for. I can't even remember that off the top of my head. That shows how much I care about him. But anyway, Greenwald received the Pulitzer Prize for his expose on Snowden, but he didn't even give us anything of worth. It's also very, very funny. And I wanted to bring this up too because I just figured out where I was trying to go with this thing with Assange. The totalitarian liberal Senator Feinstein wants to bring back Woodrow Wilson's famous Espionage Act of 1917 in honor of Assange. So Assange, if I say his name right, how do you pronounce his name?
Assange.
Assange. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess my French is really rushy because it sounds French to me. Is that right? I don't know if it is. But
I think you're right. I'm gonna say
that's what it sounds like.
Either way, I'm gonna say that you're right. For right now, so let's go with it.
Hopefully somebody can correct me so I don't feel like an idiot because he's not French. He's who knows what. At any
I
rate,
think he's from the UK, from Britain, isn't he?
No, I know he's there, but isn't he there on arrest or house arrest or whatever?
I don't know. I gotta research him some more.
Yeah, he's a little bit of an interesting, shady kind of a character, I think, just with the way of, like I said, all these things. But anyway,
He's Australian.
Australian, huh?
Yeah, he was born July the 3rd, 1971. He's a computer programmer, publisher, and whatever, and he was granted asylum.
And he's a spook. He's a spook.
Yeah,
John Young. John, by the way, John. I say, he's not an entertainer. He's not a journalist, but he's a spook. John Young, he's a cryptome.
I have my questions about that place too. I was reading last week. Yeah.
But this guy, he actually went out and he used to work for Wikileaks, but he denounced them, and he says it was a CIA front.
Mm-hmm.
In an interview with RT, he described the internet as a very large scale spying machine. Very interesting. Very interesting. I don't know why I didn't know that about Assange. He was from
Australia.
Yeah.
It seems like all the cool people right now are from Australia, right? Steve is from Australia.
Yes. Actually, that's interesting that I'm starting to know so many people from Australia. My sister's been there too. I wish I could go to Australia. I have to do that someday. But one of the things about Cass Sunstein, originally the group was programmed to attack China, and its board was heavily laden with fishy Chinese dissidents and democracy accidents from the orbit of the Soros Foundations. Interestingly, the first big publicity breakthrough with WikiLeaks in the mainstream media was provided by an infamous totalitarian, none other than Cass. They're calling him a liberal, which he is, and he's ensconced in the Obama White House. None other than Cass Sunstein, because in his op-ed published in the Washington Post of February 24, 2007, under the title "Brave New Wiki World," we read, WikiLeaks.org, founded by dissidents in China and other nations, plans to post secret government documents and to protect them from censorship with coded software. And, this guy is the one who basically blew the whistle on this and brought it forward. And this guy's, obviously, this connection to the White House, he's not someone to be trusted whatsoever. He has connections to Soros. He's not a good guy at all. And he has an awful lot of money. So, you look at this and you say, this guy's going out behind these guys, and he's in a government, and he's trying to announce this WikiLeaks to the world, and he's the one who really, brought that forward because he had such pull. And you're trying to tell me that WikiLeaks is somehow, going to be blowing anything on, on the U.S. government? It's kind of funny. I mean, they're basically another PSYOP arm that looks like, that it's kind of nice and kind of anti-government, but at the same time, it's not. I mean, just look at the actions. Look at the proof is in the pudding. These people, like they're so desperate to keep us from continually understanding that this is like the whole entire system is not only falling apart, but it's just complete crap for us. They want us to keep believing in it, so they got to pull these little rabbits out of their hat to keep us like focused away from the man behind the curtain. So you're looking into Assange, and I want people to be like very curious about these people and do a lot of research on them, because I have to apologize. Like I'm kind of we're piecing together this show as we go along. I mean, I've done some research on it, but this week was a horrible week for me. I worked in 2 jobs, and I just was so tired, and I haven't been able to have any energy whatsoever. So, like, I managed to not do as much as I wanted to do for the show. That's not to say knock any of the information that we're bringing forward, because it's all good, and I just want people to start questioning this, questioning these stories that we're told, because we're told a whole lot of stories, and it doesn't seem like any of us, or I shouldn't say any of us, but it doesn't seem like a lot of people actually question these things, especially when they first come out. I mean, I know that when these first came out, I wasn't even researching that much into these kinds of things. I wasn't paying attention to that. So I just kind of was like, this guy's saying that we're all controlled, or we're all being lied to, and we're all being spied on, and that's kind of terrible. But I didn't really look into it that deeply, because it wasn't my interest. And Soros, by the way, so this is going to jump ship just a little bit. Give me a second here. This is not good. What's going on, Crystal? If you can still hear me, but your mic was going crazy. Are you back now? Can you speak? Hello? Okay, I'll keep her down a little bit low in volume here. I don't know if I was able to help. I don't know if she can even talk. At any rate, we're going to go with the Panama Papers.
Ow.
Hey, there you are.
Okay, I had to remove the mic altogether, so I don't know what happened. I apologize about that.
Okay. It wouldn't have been a big issue, but it was extremely loud and kind of disruptive.
I heard it myself, and it was nothing that I was doing.
It happens. There could be some interference on this call from certain people that we may or may not know.
Exactly. I think so.
So, one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight was the Panama Papers, which is a newer thing, that didn't happen that long ago. And again, this is another one of these used distractions. An open question is what they're trying to distract us from. But if you're looking at this information, which the people who released it said, well, we're going to release whatever we want at the moment, and then we're going to release what we feel the authorities need to know to the authorities. So we're going to release information about how the system operates to the system. I mean, the only thing that this Panama Papers managed to do was show out all these shell companies that different people are using to hide their assets from taxes. Now, I'm an anarchist. I wish everybody to be able to hide everything from taxes. Okay, I don't have any problem with that. If you can get a job under the table, do it. You know what I mean? Like, starve the system. I don't care if you're in corporate or not. I don't care. I want you to hide your money, honestly, straight up. Now, where this gets really complicated and interesting is when you realize that the elites themselves and the people at the very top of the pyramid are using this to hide their black budget money. They're using it to hide what they get from doing the CIA drug trade. They're using it to hide all this stuff and using it to fund, their big programs behind the scenes and do all their extracurricular activities that can't be necessarily posted even in the black budget, because they have to kind of fight for funding for it, even though they're allowed to get whatever funding they want. Basically, there's only so much money to go around publicly, quote unquote. So when you look at that, and you say that these, there's all these millionaires who are quote unquote hiding their money, you wonder who's being outed here, and does it, is this leak, damaging in any way to the real system, or is it just damaging to the little guys? And another thing that they've been pushing since this Panama Papers come out is anti-tax evasion laws and tougher tax laws. That is the last possible thing that we need, considering that the economy is in such bad shape. And I mean, it really is. Like, don't listen to any of the hullabaloo, and the BS, straight up about, how somehow, somehow, oh shit, I lost my train of thought. All this hullabaloo, it's coming out about, how these billionaires or whatever are hiding their tax money. For one thing, why should we be paying taxes to begin with when the system is absolutely destroying us? Because I lost my entire train of thought. And again, like, who is really hiding their money? Like, why in the world would they be outing, like, people who are connected to Putin? Which they actually don't even get out to outing the actual, Putin himself or whatever. They started talking about individuals that were connected to them. And apparently there is about 2.6 terabytes of data. And like I said, they're releasing it to the system itself. They're not releasing it to us, to, just as a whole. So who knows what else they have in them that they're not actually bringing out. There's this Sergey Rolgin, Roldugin. He's a longtime friend of Vladimir Putin and a behind-the-scenes player in a clandestine network operated by Putin associates that has shuffled at least $2 billion through banks. Now, does that really matter? I mean, the guy's in charge of his own country. Do we really care if Putin is hiding money, and who's he hiding it from? I mean, he's in another country. Are you trying to say that he's somehow harming the United States by keeping his own money somewhere else? I mean, I guess you would say that maybe he took the money from that was made in the United States, but again, how is that that bad? I mean, if we as human beings start to realize that the system is absolutely horrible, well, realize that the system thrives on taxes, and that's the only way that it keeps going. Let that sink in for a minute. So whenever they start to campaign against, tax evasion, we should really start to think about what is tax. It's theft. If you have point a gun at somebody and take their money, but you're going to give it to charity, how is that any better? You're still stealing from somebody who didn't intend to do that with that money. And so you're taking away from extra money that we might have to help the poor ourselves, to help people ourselves. And actually make our own conscious choice to do that. So another thing that the Panama Papers, put forth was that, like, different 29 billionaires out of the Forbes magazine, they had a lot of companies managed by this firm, Mossack Farah, and they're basically targeting everybody except for any relevant American or NATO names, and high profile, realistically equivalent European names. In fact, despite the fact that the Russians, the Syrians, and the Chinese and the Icelandics, they have all been revealed for the offshore dealers that they are, we are being led to believe that the oligarchs of the United States, England, Israel, and Germany are squeaky clean. So why in the world are the targets of the Panama Papers being exposed only by means of guilt by association? Again, they're not like showing that he is exactly connected, but they're saying that people that are connected to him are doing this tax evasion. They're not really. It's guilt by association. It's not actual, like, direct proof that this individual is actually doing that. It's absolutely silly to sit here and attack, anybody who tries to evade taxes. Americans complain all the time about the IRS and how horrible they are, but very few people are, like, saying that we could actually abolish them. Very few people are getting the point, of how horrible the system is, that we need, some people still seem to think that we need it. I honestly hate a lot of the arguments put forth against anarchy. I agree that it cannot work today until humanity mans up and decides to understand personal sovereignty and personal, how do I put that? until mankind as a whole decides to stand up and say, hey, we need to have personal responsibility for our own actions and live by the golden rule, or live by natural law, which is simply, do no harm to anybody else. And then if they do, you have the right to defend yourself. So, that's all it really takes. But nobody's willing, not that many people are willing to grasp that, to put that into action. I think that's where all our trouble comes from, is that we as human beings are not, as a whole, as a species, putting this into play. We're all being led around. We're all like being cajoled into certain directions, or look over here. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Don't realize that the entire system is designed to, it's all based on a farce. It's based on the belief in authority. It's basically religion. So you have these papers, and you have this Snowden guy, and you have all these different things going on, and you have the Anonymous, which is basically a front runner for the CIA. And like whenever I mentioned earlier that there was the budget increase in I think it was in 2013. They were going to make 13 different quote unquote cyber warfare divisions. So is that what Anonymous is? That's a really good question, because a lot of people have said over the years that Anonymous has a lot of connections to the the CIA. They have a lot of connections to these people who have all this power. So if you start to look at Anonymous in that light, and then look at their actions, like when they attacked Iran, in theory, because they did attack Iran. They attacked one of their they attacked their government websites and their bank, et cetera, et cetera. Now that was a while ago when all this stuff was really heavy against Iran. Now it's all about Syria, and now it's all about Russia, China, and such, and this whole thing in the Middle East going down, which is anybody's guess what they're doing over there. We can be sure that it's not what's being reported on the mainstream news. However, there's all this stuff going down in Syria, and nobody's really talking about any of the really important things. And if you look at what Anonymous was doing back when everything was against Iran, like they attacked Iran to try to say during those big protests, and to say, well, we have solidarity with the Iranian people. But those protests, were very much, I'm not entirely certain they were organic. If we look at how the CIA in the original Iranian scandal tried to did oust leaders of Iran and put in their own puppet dictatorship, and you have this guy who very much does not want to play ball with the cabal, with the system, and suddenly his people are like, let's get rid of him, and then Anonymous comes out and says, well, let's help these people get rid of him. So are we certain that was really a grassroots event? Especially when Anonymous, who says that they're against, the United States and horrible things that the United States has done, et cetera, but they take very little action against the United States. But here they are attacking Iran, which is one of the United States' sworn enemies. That's a clear conflict of interest for something that is supposed to be a bunch of loose hackers who are really smart, and they're all against our system. They're not acting like they're against our system. They're not, because if they actually are as good as they say they are, why can't they actually how should I put this? How can they not attack the United States? Why wouldn't they be able to take down the whole financial system if they really have the power that they say that they have? And then like in February 10th, 2015, there's an article. It's by Wiley Man. Very interesting. He's basically saying that CIA Anonymous, and he's calling them CI Anonymous, basically, which is awesome. He's basically saying that they're shutting down, and this was proved, that they were shutting down dissident websites and Twitter feeds on behalf of the current administration and their fraudulent war on ISIS, which really isn't ISIS. It's Dakesh, I think, is the correct term for it, the real term, as opposed to this quote-unquote war on an Egyptian goddess. Which, by the way, is totally a psyop and created by, our government. There's a whole bunch of our government. I don't even know why I called it that. There is no our, the government. the CIA is very much funding and creating ISIS in the very beginning, and there's people who have said that they've gone off the track, quote unquote, but I very much doubt that they have. They more than likely still are doing whatever it is that they want to do, and doing it on the behalf of the CIA. They're making a lot of money in doing what they're doing until Russia got in the picture and started, kicking their butts. But at the same time, are we sure that that's really what's going on over there? Like, why in the world are they suddenly seemingly cleaning up this giant mess that is, the CIA proxy army, basically? Like, why is this whole thing going on during this thing? But anyway, like, Anonymous has been shutting down. They shut down this Twitter feed, right? And it was belonging to someone called the handle Serious Side, referring to the ongoing attack by proxy being waged by Obama against he says Obama, but it's really just the CIA and the system, against the legitimate government of Syria and all those who support it. And they took out this Twitter feed, but this Twitter feed is one of the Twitter feeds that routinely is a good source of information, or was a good source of information, of current news in Syria, and is generally opposed to what the United States is doing worldwide. And this is this is a beneficial Twitter feed, right? It was putting out good information about what's really going on over in Syria. And Anonymous shuts it down and says, well, it was ISIS. So really? We're talking to somebody who's talking about how this war is going crazy, and they're like on the ground, kind of stuff, and they're trying to share this evidence. And these people are shut down by the very same organization that attempts to say that it's against the current system. So I think that's another thing that we really need to be paying attention to. I mean, it's a controlled opposition within the framework of the Hegelian dialectic that has been set up in our world. I mean, we have the Democrats versus Republicans. We got the Anonymous versus the United States. We've got Assange versus the United States, and yet even, because the United States was like trying to prosecute him, but at the same time, like, he gets away with it. And then you got Snowden versus the United States. But when you have real, genuine people come out against the United States, they get hammered. And none of these groups are really getting hammered. And you're trying to tell me that the CIA doesn't have the resources to track down Anonymous? Really? And they go after everybody else. I mean, they're killing doctors off left and right. I've seen information on that, and I really haven't touched that yet. That's a very interesting topic. But, there's all the stuff going down around the world, and you're telling me that, they can't find with their powerful surveillance technology, or they are tapping everything, that they can't find Anonymous? Really? I mean, are they really that smart? And pretty much everything that they do, are not, how should I put that? They're not, doing anything that's actually against the system itself. So at any rate, that's all the time we have for today, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you very much for joining us on Revising Reality. We'll be back next week, and 2 weeks from now, on June 5th, we will have Steve Gilmore back in for another chat. We'll have a much more interesting episode next week as well. I hope you have a good week and do some research. Thank you very much.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio!
Enjoy your
extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another?
Extra big-ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please
What?
come back when you can afford to make
no,
a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My kids are starving.